আপনাদের সবাইকে স্বাগত জানাচ্ছি আজকের ওয়েবিনারে। তো আজকের এই ভার্চুয়াল ওয়েবিনারের টপিকটা হচ্ছে প্ল্যানিং অ্যান্ড সিস্টেম ক্যাপাসিটি ডেভেলপমেন্ট অ্যান্ড ডিসেন্ট্রালাইজেশন অফ ডিজাস্টার ম্যানেজমেন্ট কমিটি ইন আরবান সেন্টার্স অফ আর্থকুয়েক প্রিপেয়ার্ডনেস। তো এমনিতেই আমরা সবাই জানি, আমরা সবাই অবগত বাংলাদেশের দুর্যোগ মোকাবেলার যে এবং জরুরি যে সমস্ত দুর্যোগ মোকাবেলার সক্ষমতার বিষয়টা, সেটা আমরা অনেক ক্ষেত্রেই আমরা একটা স্ট্যান্ডার্ডে, আমরা রোল মডেলে হিসাবে পরিচিত। তো তারপরে এই জিনিসটাকে আরো শানিত করার জন্য আজকে আসলে কি কি করা যেতে পারে সেই বিষয়গুলো নিয়ে এক্সপার্টরা আজকে আমাদের এখানে যোগ দিয়েছেন এই আলোচনার মধ্য দিয়ে। ঢাকা আর্থকুয়েক অ্যান্ড ইমার্জেন্সি প্রিপেয়ারনেস এনহ্যান্সিং রেজিলিয়েন্স ডিপার প্রজেক্টের আওতায় আমাদের এই ওয়েবিনারটা হচ্ছে। আজকে আমাদের এখানে দুর্যোগ ব্যবস্থাপনা ব্যুরোর মহাপরিচালক জনাব আতিকুল হক সহ অনেক বিশেষজ্ঞ এখানে উপস্থিত আছেন, এই বিষয়গুলো নিয়ে কথা বলবেন। আমরা হয়তো এখান থেকে কিছু সুপারিশ আসবে। তো সেই বিষয়গুলো নিয়ে এই আলোচনা অনুষ্ঠানটা শুরু করার জন্য আমি জলিল ভাইকে অনুরোধ জানাচ্ছি। জলিল ভাই, প্লিজ।
Welcome to this second webinar organized by Deeper Project. We have with us Director General, Department of Disaster Management and Bureau. I think we should not wait for any more, and we should start. This workshop is on planning and systems capacity development and decentralization of disaster management committees. In fact, a lot to talk about standing orders on disasters and their popularity, and how it has, reached out to the disaster management committee and what has been the impact, especially in the urban centers. I request Director General, Mr. Mohammad Atikul Haq, sir, to give us your kind words and to inaugurate this workshop.
আমরা আসলে জানি যে দুর্যোগ আমরা প্রতিনিয়ত মোকাবেলা করছি, প্রতিনিয়ত ফেস করছি, আমরা প্রস্তুতিও নিচ্ছি। আমরা যারা আজকে এই ওয়েবিনার উদ্যোক্তা, তাদেরকে আমি স্বাগত জানাচ্ছি, ধন্যবাদ জানাচ্ছি যে এই একটা বিষয় নিয়ে আলোচনা করার জন্য। আমাদের দক্ষতা এবং সক্ষমতা বৃদ্ধির আরো অনেক সুযোগ রয়েছে, যেটা উপস্থাপক প্রথমেই যেটা বলেছিলেন যে আসলে আমরা রোল মডেল হয়েছি, কিন্তু কাজ করার এখনো অনেকটুকু জায়গা রয়েছে, অনেকটুকু স্পেস আছে, অনেক এরিয়া রয়েছে, যে এরিয়াগুলিতে আমরা আরো ভালোভাবে, সম্পৃক্তভাবে এবং জয়েন্টলি কাজ করতে পারি। মূলত ডিজাস্টার ডিডিএম যে বিষয়টা নিয়ে কাজ করে, যারা ডিজাস্টার নিয়ে অন্যান্য সংস্থা, সরকারি বেসরকারি এনজিও আইএনজিও যারা আছে, ইন্টারন্যাশনাল সংস্থা যারা আছে, সবার মধ্যে সমন্বয় সাধন করার একটা বড় কাজ ডিজাস্টার ম্যানেজমেন্টের। আমরা সবসময় চেষ্টা করে যাচ্ছি সবাইকে আমাদের পোর্শন থেকে সাপোর্ট দেওয়ার, যে কি কি আমরা করতে পারি, আমাদের কোন জায়গায় লিমিটেশন আছে, কোন জায়গায় আমাদের এফোর্টটা প্রয়োজন হয়। এসওডি নিয়ে কথা আসছে। আমরা এখনো এসওডি, এমন একটি এসওডি আমরা তৈরি করতে পেরেছি যেটাতে দুর্যোগ ব্যবস্থাপনা আসলে এহেন অংশ নাই যে অংশটা কভার করে না, কিন্তু সবচেয়ে বড় সমস্যা রয়ে গেছে, এখন আমরা এটাকে ডিসেমিনেট করতে পারি নাই, সর্বত্র এটাকে ছড়িয়ে দিতে পারি নাই। হ্যাঁ, 19-এ হয়েছে, প্রিন্ট হয়েছে। আমরা সর্বশেষ গত অক্টোবরে মাননীয় প্রধানমন্ত্রী ইংলিশ ভার্সনটা পাবলিশ করেছেন, মোড়ক উন্মোচন করেছেন। এখন আমাদের হাতে অ্যাভেলেবল বাংলা এবং ইংলিশ ভার্সন দুটাই। আমাদের যেটা প্রয়োজন, ওয়ার্ড কমিটি পর্যন্ত আমাদের এসওডির যে কার্যবলী, তাদের কি করণীয়, কে কি কাজ করবে, যেটা মূল লক্ষ্য উদ্দেশ্য এসওডির, এই বিষয়টা আমরা একবারে রুট লেভেল পর্যন্ত যেন আমরা পৌঁছে দিতে পারি। আমরা ইতিমধ্যে আমরা লক্ষ্য করেছি, আমি অনেকগুলি প্রোগ্রামে গিয়েছি, কেয়ারের প্রোগ্রামে গিয়েছি, আমি ব্রাকের প্রোগ্রামে গিয়েছি। তারা এসওডির স্ব অংশগুলো আলাদাভাবে, যেহেতু এসওডি একটা বড় বই, আকারে একটু বড়, ওয়েট একটু বেশি, খুব বেশি পোর্টেবল এবং ইজি পোর্টেবল না, এই জন্যই যে কাজটা আমরা গত সপ্তাহ যাবৎ করেছি, গত লাস্ট মান্থ, আমরা ফিল্ড লেভেলে এসওডির যতটুকু অংশ প্রযোজ্য, অর্থাৎ বিভাগীয়, জেলা, উপজেলা, ইউনিয়ন এবং ওয়ার্ড এবং সিটি কর্পোরেশন ওয়ার্ড পর্যায় পর্যন্ত যতটুকু অংশ, ওইটুকুকে আমরা আলাদা বই আকারে প্রকাশ করেছি। আলাদা বই আকারে প্রকাশ করলে যে সুবিধাটা হয়েছে, সকলে এটাকে জাস্ট আমার হাতে যেটা আছে ছোট্ট আকারে, অনলি 52 পেজ, 52 পেজের মধ্যে আমরা সকল কাজগুলিকে অন্তর্ভুক্ত করেছি। কারণ ওয়ার্ড পর্যায়ের কমিটির আসলে মাননীয় প্রধানমন্ত্রীর নেতৃত্বে যে কমিটি আছে, ওই কমিটির কার্যাবলী জানার আসলে ওয়ার্ড পর্যায়ের খুব প্রয়োজন নাই। আমরা এভাবে করেছি। এটা আসলে অনেকটা আমরা ফলো করেছি যে আমরা পরস্পর শিক্ষণীয় কিছু বিষয় আছে। আমি যখন ব্রাকের ট্রেনিং প্রোগ্রামে কুড়িগ্রাম গেলাম, তখন দেখলাম যে ব্রাক এই মডেলে, এই লেভেলে করতে পেরেছে। দেন আমি এসে আমার পর্যায় থেকে আমরা এটা করেছি। এখন আমরা প্রত্যেক মেম্বারকে, যত কমিটি আছে বাংলাদেশের, আমরা ইতিমধ্যে গত সপ্তাহে আমরা মুন্সিগঞ্জ জেলা কভার করেছি, মানিকগঞ্জ জেলা কভার করেছি, ইউনিয়ন কমিটিগুলি শেষ করেছি, আরো কিছু ইউনিয়ন বাকি আছে। দেন আমরা উপজেলা কমিটি করব, উপজেলা কমিটির পরে জেলা কমিটি করব। আমরা যদি সাফিসিয়েন্ট ফান্ড থাকে তাহলে আমরা তো আরো 1-2টা জেলা এই বছরই শেষ করব। আমরা আগে প্রায়োরিটি দিব যেগুলি আমাদের ডিজাস্টার প্রোন এরিয়া, সাইক্লোন প্রোন আর ফ্লাড প্রোন এরিয়া, এই দুইটার জন্য আসলে আমরা আগে কভার করব। কভার করার পরে বাকিগুলিকে আমরা আসলে আওতায় নিয়ে আসব। তাহলে এখানে রেড ক্রিসেন্টের, জার্মান রেড ক্রিসেন্ট যে উদ্যোগটা নিয়েছেন, এখানে যে সংস্থা আমাদের সাথে সম্পৃক্ত হয়ে এই উদ্যোগটা নিয়েছেন, আমি সাধুবাদ জানাচ্ছি। আমি চেষ্টা করছি ডিডিএম এর পক্ষ থেকে আমার সচিব মহোদয়ের ইনস্ট্রাকশন, প্রতিমন্ত্রী মহোদয়ের গাইডলাইন যেভাবে আছে, as early as possible আমরা এসওডিটাকে ডিসেমিনেশন করব এবং তাদেরকে ট্রেন্ড আপ করব। এসওডিটা বানিয়ে বই আকারে আমরা ঠিক রেখে বা বুক সেলফে সাজায় রাখার অবস্থাটা যেন না থাকি, সবাই যেন প্র্যাকটিস করে। আমরাও ড্রিলে চলে যেতে যাচ্ছি, আমরা ড্রিলে প্র্যাকটিস করতে যে এই অবস্থা, এই পর্যায়ে আমরা আমাদের উন্নয়ন সহযোগী সংস্থা, দাতা সংস্থা বলি, আমাদের আইএনজিও, এনজিও যারা আছে, আমি সকলের সহযোগিতা চাবো ডিডিএম এর পক্ষ থেকে, যে আমরা যদি সরকারের পক্ষে হয়তো অল্প সময়ে এতগুলি কভার করা কঠিন হবে, অসম্ভব আমি বলছি না, হয়তো একটু সময় সাপেক্ষ বিষয় হবে, কিন্তু আমরা যদি ভাগ ভাগ করে নিতে পারি, এরিয়া ক্লাস্টার ভাগ করে নিতে পারি, যে এই জেলায় যে এনজিও কাজ করছে ওনারা যদি অংশটুকু করে, আমাদের পার্টিসিপেন্ট থাকবে, আমরা পার্টিসিপেট করব, দেন আমরা অন্য জেলায় করব। আপনারা এই জেলায় করলেন, আমরা ওই জেলার এই উপজেলায় করছি, তারা এই উপজেলার এই অংশ করবে, তাহলে হয়তো জয়েন্টলি খুব অল্প সময়ের মধ্যে আমরা কাভারেজটা অনেক বেশি দিতে পারবো। আমি এই পর্যায়ে আমার বিশেষ করে সিটি কর্পোরেশনের যে বিষয়টা আছে, একটা বিষয় থাকে বিশেষ করে অগ্নিকাণ্ড এবং ভূমিকম্প, এই দুইটা বিষয় সিটি এরিয়াতে একটু বেশি কাজ করে ফ্লাডের চেয়ে। জলাবদ্ধতা একটা বিষয় থাকে সিটি কর্পোরেশনের মধ্যে বা পৌর এলাকার মধ্যে, এখানে আমরা সিটি কর্পোরেশনের কমিটিগুলিকে একটা চ্যালেঞ্জ আমাদের মধ্যে থাকে সব সময়। সে এখন আমরা ইউনিয়ন পরিষদকে ট্রেন্ড আপ করছি। খুব ভেরি রিসেন্টলি উইদিন 6 মান্থ ইউনিয়ন পরিষদের ইলেকশন কমপ্লিট হবে, দেন অনেক চেয়ারম্যান এবং মেম্বার মে বি চেঞ্জ, নতুন মুখ দেখা যাবে। আমাদেরকে চিন্তায় রাখতে হবে যে যারা নতুন আসবেন তাদেরকে কিভাবে ট্রেনিং এর আওতায় নিয়ে আসা, কারণ তারা আগামী 5 বছর এই কমিটির নেতৃত্ব দিবেন, এই কমিটিতে কাজ করবেন, কিন্তু তারা হয়তো ট্রেনিং পেলেন না। এখানে যদি কোনো এনজিও বা সংস্থা যদি আমাদেরকে কোঅপারেশন করেন, আমরা মোস্ট ওয়েলকাম জানাবো তাদেরকে। আমরা আমাদের পক্ষ থেকে যতটুকু সহায়তা করা দরকার আমরা ততটুকু সহায়তা দিব।
Thank you very much, sir, for your kind words and encouragement to us. We all realize that how important the standing orders on disaster is. And thank you also for reminding us that how the ward disaster management committees and the decentralization of disaster management committees from district, upazila to union, and as well as in the city corporation, as well as in the ward committees are essential, and how this legal document has contributed in the disaster management framework in Bangladesh. Thank you very much, sir, for your kind presence and inaugurating this workshop. As we go further, I will just read out who are the other key speakers today with us. And after that, I will give you an overview of this project, the genesis of this project, how it started, and what we have been doing in the urban centers. So we have with us Mr. Henry. He's from the United Nations, the advisor. He will also speak on the importance of SOD. And then we have Mr. Humayun Kabir, sir. He's from the Dhaka University. So he will also enlighten us from an academic point of view, the importance of decentralization, the planning and system, and how SOD has been instrumental in the disaster management framework in Bangladesh. Then we also will be joined by Achala as of he is the country representative for American Red Cross. As of now, I can't see him, but he has assured us that he will also join. Then we will have the session on the questions and answers from the participants. If you have any pertinent question, and towards the end we will summarize it, and that's it. We will be also joined by some of our donor colleagues from Bangkok. We welcome them on this webinar. So before I invite any of the key speakers, I would like to give you an overview of this project and the genesis. This Dhaka Earthquake and Emergency Preparedness Enhancing Resilience is an earthquake preparedness project which is focused in the Dhaka South City Corporation. This is funded by European Commission, and we have been there in these urban centers for many years, since 2017. What we have been doing essentially is we work on the system strengthening, we work with the decentralization, we capacity disaster management committees, and we also develop a volunteers pool, which is very important for emergency response. So the idea is how the local response capacities are developed at the ward level, and how the the upscaling of coordination is happening between zones to wards and to the city corporations. The project has also done some pilots on private sectors, especially with the market associations, and also with Uber and Pathao, to bring them in so that we have an extended pool of volunteers in case of any eventuality. Unfortunately, the project was hit by COVID and we had to redirect it. So in the redirection process, the project also supported around 1,500 households with the cash grants in the urban centers, and during the peak of the COVID. And this was supplemented by the mental health support and the self-care trainings to the frontliners, be that police, RAB, and scouts who were actively involved in the COVID response. So the project is still on, and it will be continuing until the end of April. This webinar, particularly, what we are aiming is to bring a galaxy of people together from different backgrounds, from media, from academics, from United Nations, and from essentially from Government of Bangladesh personals, to talk about the importance of the project, the learnings, and also to share cross learnings that we have had in the project so far. Today, as the topic talks about planning and systems, the capacity development. So what we essentially want to talk about is how SOD has supported in decentralization approach, how the disaster management committees have been formed, if they are formed, constituted, are they really functional? Because that was one of the target of the project, that how to enhance their functionality in the overall period of the project. To begin with, may I request Mr. Nitai Sarkar to give us your perspective from the government of Bangladesh, as you have been heading a unit which is the trainings unit at Department of Disaster Management. So what has been the overall experience, and what's your message to all of us on this webinar when we talk about standing orders on disasters and decentralization of disaster management committee?
Let's start with a very brief on standing orders on disaster, I mean SOD. What is SOD? The SOD creates the opportunity to establish disaster management committee at every level. It provides ample scope for the government, NGOs, and private sectors to think locally and plan need-based program involving the community. At a glance, SOD is the first document for disaster management in Bangladesh without legal backup. It was first published in 1997 in Bangla. Then English version was published in 1999 with some modification. Then the first SOD was mainly focused on response issues in disaster management, though it was focused on disaster risk reduction. So in the first SOD, a few hazards are addressed like flood, cyclone, droughts. These are the main focused hazards in first SOD. Then it was revised with a focus on disaster risk reduction and inclusion issues in 2010. Then again, SOD was revised in 2019. Now, SOD has legal backup by Disaster Management Act enacted in 2012. If we see some salient features in SOD, we'll find the major hazards in Bangladesh. What are the major hazards? Then progression of disaster management in Bangladesh. It has the regulatory framework with the institutional framework. SOD outlines the roles and responsibilities of relevant ministries and departments and various disaster management committees for ensuring coordination. It also outlines the roles and responsibilities of various committees from national to local level. It provides the coordination mechanism for overall disaster management in the country. So what are the issues? What are the new issues in revised SOD in 2010? We'll see change in focus from conventional relief and response to DRR culture. Then revised SOD was more focused on DRR, earthquake, tsunami, landslide, and fire are included in 2010. Regulatory framework are also in place. National mechanism for policy guidance and coordination was elaborated in 2010. Gender, children, disabled, and elderly people issues were well taken. And multi-agency disaster incident management system are also outlined in 2010. Then what's new in 2019? Mostly focused on DRR, lightning and chemical hazards are included. Ward level disaster management committees are placed for both urban and rural. National mechanism for policy guidance and coordination is again elaborated. Gender, children, PWDs, and elderly people issues are also more focused in 2010. We elaborated coordination mechanism is in place in 2019. As we have seen, there are no ward level disaster management committees are in place in SOD up to in 2010 revision. But 2019, we have ward level disaster management committees for both rural and urban areas. So now SOD is more focused on disaster risk reduction or disaster risk management in the country. We have national mechanism for policy guidance and elaborated coordination mechanism. For national level, we have various new committees. One of them, earlier we didn't have division level disaster management committees, but in the new SOD, we have division level disaster management committees with its roles, responsibilities in pre-disaster, during disaster, and post-disaster. We also have one of the new committees, it's a chemical hazard management committees. Then we have damage and need assessment committees at national level. So these are the few new national level disaster management committees which came up with in new SOD in 2019. So these are the some issues, and also we have ward level disaster management committees. I mean Poroshobha Disaster Management Committee. Also after union, we have ward level disaster management committees with their roles, responsibilities for both pre-disaster during disaster and post-disaster. So now SOD is more robust for disaster risk management activities in the country. So these are the some issues taken up in the new version of SOD.
Thank you, Mr. Nitai, and thank you for your taking us through the journey of SODs in Bangladesh, that it started in 2010, and it was in Bangla, and then how it was in English, and in 2000, how it has progressed from having a focus on relief and recovery to disaster risk reduction, and eventually to the earthquake preparedness, and also the importance of structural importance, having divisional committees, district committees, union, upazila committees, and now with the recent one, we have the SOD talks about the ward level disaster management committees. So this entire discussion needs to go a little beyond that, how the SOD has actually supported the mandated disaster management committees in planning and systems. And that's what we realize, especially in the urban centers, that planning and system needs to be enhanced. And we have a legal instrument, which is SOD. How do we popularize it? And also, how do we acquaint this to the duty bearers who are there out? So I hope that this support from the DDM to all of us will be continued in the course of work that we do, and we thank you for your unflinching support in the process. Going forward, I will also keep on giving you some updates that how this project has supported decentralization, and how we have the deeper project, which is funded by European Commission, that how it has supported the planning and system at the local level. Before I do that, I want to go to Mr. Himayun sir to enlighten us, please, about the from an academic point of view, the importance of SOD, the importance of local planning in the disaster response vis-a-vis the urban centers.
Before talking about the SOD, let me, briefly talk about myself. How I started my career and how I have been associated with disaster management initiatives or activities, research in Bangladesh. I started my career as a research associate in the Disaster Research Training and Management Center at the University of Dhaka. It is one of the pioneering institutions in Bangladesh, established immediately after two big disasters in Bangladesh, 1991 cyclone and 1988, flood. So under this institution, actually, we conducted many good research initiatives. I remember in 2001 and 2, we had a project funded by Bangladesh Port Foundation in the three different coastal areas of the country, Uttardia, Chakuri, and Bashkali. And we explored how people have been adjusting with cyclone disasters with their local knowledge. And we also trained a total of around 300 people in the three different coastal areas. And I remember, what sort of problems we faced at the time while approaching, in terms of the accessibility to these islands, particularly Kutubdia. I remember, we had to walk. And I have been to the island, several times. I remember this year I have been there, twice, even during Corona. We are doing some research there. So this has been possible exactly. What has been already mentioned, in the beginning by Honorable TZ or Nitaida, for example, in terms of capacity building, right, and the development of the accessibility, all have been possible, through the initiatives of government, NGOs and NGOs, certainly. All right, so if we talk about our country, right, so we are students of geography, and Bangladesh sometimes is recognized as the supermarket of disasters, right? So from different perspectives, Bangladesh is completely different, right? Because it's unique in terms of population size and distribution in a very small, the size of the country. The population density is more than 1,200. It's quite, I mean, unique, because the world average density is less than 500 persons. Just imagine, even compared to China, India. So this is one. And another thing is Bangladesh has extensive floodplain, which is also unique, and supporting this enormous, population. This is another one. But as I said, the geographical context is highly supportive to the occurrence of natural disasters. As already mentioned, the cyclones, right? It's quite natural, normal, but in the coastal areas, around 40 to 50 million people live there, and facing tremendous cyclones in the past. If we talk about 1970 cyclone, 1991 cyclone, 1997 cyclone Cedar, 2007 cyclone Ayla, 2009, Bulbul, Foni, and many, right? Even devastating floods, 1987, 88, 1998, and almost every year now, right? And we experience, devastating landslides even, and we used to experience devastating droughts in the past. Riverbank erosion is here serious, displacing millions of people, and hot knot actually, flash flood in the Howard areas, we experienced 2007. So, we accept some cryological hazards, we got, all sort of natural disasters in this country. Because, our geography is highly supportive to occurrence, all these natural disasters. But the thing is, as already mentioned by Nitaida and, others, because I started discussing about how we did, in 2001 and 2002, and what sort of experience we had in working in the coastal areas, right, in terms of accessibility in the intercoastal. And after that, I personally have been involved in many research works in the intercoastal areas. I remember we took the base of Oporna to Hatia once, right, Nijumdeep. So in terms of accessibility, the simply revolution has taken place in Bangladesh, right? So this is certainly one of the most important regions for the declining number of deaths, due to disasters, right? Because if you remember, in 1991, 140 people died. 140,000 people died, in the statistics of government. But in the cyclones Cedar, Ayla, only 7,000 people died. And even now, we are experiencing devastating floods, for example. Millions of people in every year, are underwater. But how many people die? Right? Certainly, as I said, there has been a very important role by government agencies, agencies of the international NGOs, national NGOs. Or at least, I personally, from our research experiences, I can relate, what sort of changes, has taken place. Another thing is, as already mentioned by Nitaida, that the first SOD, Standing Orders in Disaster, focused mainly the post-disaster response and recovery strategies, right, activities. But, we know about the international efforts or endeavors, shifting from the post-disaster activities to pre-disaster, preparedness, early warning, enhancing early warning, right? That started from Japan, for example, through IDNDR. We know about World Conference on Disaster Reduction in Yokohama. Then the Hyogo framework, Sendai framework, and all. And Bangladesh being, part of all these endeavors, all these efforts, is obligated to produce or undertake initiatives, right? Should be intended to combat disasters, right? And invest particularly in the pre-disaster period. So the 1997 SOD as intended, but it is certainly an important and one of the pioneering documents in Bangladesh in the field of disaster management. But, we have also had, huge progress in disaster management, right? Through, for example, the approval of the Disaster Management Act in 2012, right? And even the program, by Comprehensive Disaster Management Program, I remember. And since I have been involved in disaster management programs, disaster management master degree programs in Brack University, I remember, how CDMP, helped, to finance or invest to, let's say, develop manpower in the field of disaster management. Even in Dhaka University, we initiated in 2010, right? So there are many sort of studies, I mean, or programs, master's programs, developing manpower, let's say in the field of disaster management. So, I mean, the development that we have actually is all due to all this progress, certainly. So, as I was saying, that risk reduction is extremely important now, right? So, with this emphasis as being part of the international efforts and endeavors, Bangladesh is obligated, and Bangladesh produced 2010 study, as mentioned already, and later updated 2019, and then the Bangla version. Most important thing is Bangla version has been prepared. So that's going to be good. Task, as I would say. And if I compare, particularly because I have noted down something from 2010 and 2019 SODs, there are significant differences in 2019 SODs, particularly the existing policy, Disaster Management Act 2012, the plans of disaster management, all these are mentioned actually in the 2019, which was missing in 2010. And one chapter has been added in 2019 SOD, which is on the National Emergency Operation Coordination, right? And it specifically talks about the emergency response on earthquake disaster, right? As well, other disasters. So there's some of the things, and certainly in details, the roles and responsibilities of the different institutions, agencies are prescribed. Okay, if I talk about the strength of 2019 SOD, it is certainly a detail. The existing policy I've already mentioned. The other instruments, which was missing in the previous SODs, it is a detailed presentation of the national and local coordination, right? And I have counted actually from the document, there are 16 national coordinations committees and 18 local coordination committees are presented here. So the roles and responsibilities of different agencies are in details. In 2019, it's all right. And I have already mentioned one additional chapter is incorporated on National Emergency Disaster Operation Coordination, dealing with the objectives and activities of, it is called ANEOC. And in the chapter Civil Military Coordination, with a total of 19 members, headed by an additional Secretary of Ministry of Disaster Management Relief, is suggested, and to tackle specifically earthquake and other disasters as well in different phases. If I talk about the gaps that, in my opinion, in the SOD, there should be, in my opinion, there should be some platform to engage, include community-based organizations in different levels of the disaster management committees. Although mentioned, in the union or ward level disaster management committee, because many members are there. Sometimes the committee can co-opt any representative. The local representatives are there, journalists are there, but community-based organizations, particularly the clubs, for example, because you have to remember that it is again the local people that have to be their capacity has to be enhanced, right, in order to have success actually in terms of disaster management. And there should be some platform to include participation of the stakeholders involved in the management of the influxes, like Rohingya refugees. For example, the government of Bangladesh has established RRC, Refugee Relief and Repatriation Commission, in order to address the issues related to Rohingya influxes. But SOD actually should address, this aspect, these issues. And the SOD should also address, in my opinion, extraordinary or pandemic situations. For example, COVID-19, the active roles of different institutions are likely to contribute, in my opinion, to combat the impacts of such pandemic, through enhancing people's awareness, for example, providing health-related services, etc. So when we update or amend the SOD in future, so that we keep in mind, these aspects. And what are actually, in my opinion, the major challenges of the implementation of SOD? I remember, when Cyclone Cedar took place in 2007, it was widely reported in the newspaper, that it was again ensuring a strong coordination is a major challenge, in Bangladesh, right? As I said, there are as many as 16 national, 18, local coordination committees are prescribed. Sometimes, there's a proverb, too many cooks will spoil the brooks, right? It's always a challenge, to, ensure a strong mechanism, right? Because when a disaster takes place, because if there are lot of, coordination committees, and it's very difficult to ensure coordination among the coordination committee. So in my opinion, so in this case, I particularly suggest to think about it. But it's certainly true that I have already mentioned in the beginning, that the coordination mechanism at various levels in Bangladesh has been strengthened, certainly. Otherwise, the number of deaths that has drastically declined, right, is again due to the tremendous progress of all the GOs, NGOs, INGOs. It's true. So again, effective implementation requires, in my opinion, regular workshop or seminar with the local representatives, CBOs, through DRROs or Upazila Disaster Committee, Union Disaster Committees, to make them aware, particularly the roles and responsibilities of different stakeholders, and how efficiently a stakeholder can play a role in disaster management activities. And finally, in order to ensure strong coordination, again, at pre, during, and post disaster management, phases at different levels, the interaction meetings, workshops, etc., can be arranged among all the existing coordination bodies.
Thank you very much for giving us a very detailed context of the country, the hazards that are surrounded, and the issues that we are facing. That one of the purpose is to bring together academicians, practitioners, United Nations professionals, media, and touch upon what you have highlighted is we have everything in place. The Bangladesh, of course, has the multiple hazards, but it was also a disaster risk reduction champion in 2015. Nominated by UNDRR. But what you have touched upon is the effective implementation. So that's something which all we need to put our heads together and see how the implementation of all that legal frameworks, as well as the institutional capacities that we have, how do we implement the disaster preparedness and disaster risk reduction, having this multiple hazard around us. It also brings us back to the deeper project that when you mentioned about the roles and responsibility of the duty bearers, and I do agree that this is also very important. What deeper project, which has been there for past many years, has been supporting these disaster management committees in the urban centers. So the focus has been capacity building and also to enhance their linkage from ward to the city level corporation, so that what we had seen before the SOD 2019, that the city corporations were overwhelmed with their work. So there was no ward disaster management committee. Now that the inclusion has happened and we have these 10 ward committees, but there are other issues. Now that we have constituted them, there are no fundings. And when we do the local planning, those local plans are being developed, formulated based on the risk that we do, the risk assessment, but there are no funds to support those plans. So again, the discussion has to be, we have to reflect collectively that how we can create some local resources at the local level, be that the urban, because urban is a new rural, and we all have a kind of, our focus has been into the rural settings. So how do we bring back that attention towards the urban and functionalize these disaster management committees and enhance our plannings and systems to do a better disaster response? Going forward, I would like to call upon our dear friend, Mr. Henry, who comes from United Nations and does the most important job, which is coordination, and also brings the practical examples that what are the challenges and what are the practical issues at the field level, because he has been interacting with the multiple stakeholders while doing the coordination. So we would look forward and to hear from him that what are the practical things and what are the key challenges and what are the recommendations to take this SOD forward and to do the local planning and enhance our systems. Over to Mr. Henry.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I'm very happy to be here. Greetings to DGDDM, the German Red Cross colleague, all the RCRC movement colleagues, and all the partners of the DEEPR project, as well as all the previous speakers. Shuvo Shokal, Assalamu alaikum. If you don't mind too much, I just would like to flag that in the future, we really would like to avoid males, so that all key speakers are male. We would like to have women speakers as well. I'm sure there are many very highly competent women in Bangladesh, much more competent than me, that could also be part of this panel. So let me give you some quite an introduction first. So basically, I'm in the country for almost 5 years, and one of my first, let's say, activity with the humanitarian community was actually to organize consultation with humanitarian stakeholders on the SOD 2010 and gather their recommendations on how the revision process should, what the revision process should take on board. And this consultation occurred in 2017. And the work, the revision of the 2010 SOD continued, notably supported by the National Resilience Program, which is led by the MODMR and supported by UNDP, UNOPS, UN Women, and other key ministries. And so with the support of the NRP, this SOD 2019 were finally revised, and the English version released in October last year. So previous speakers highlighted some of the key highlights of the SOD 2019, but I'd like to add a few others that are very, very important for the humanitarian community. And some of these highlights are the following. The 2019 have now endorsed the cluster approach for coordination. And this is extremely important because through this revision process, it is clear that Bangladesh really does everything it can actually to align its legal framework to international best practices. And at the international level, you have the global cluster system, and Bangladesh has developed its national cluster system. So this is really excellent because it really enhances also the predictability of the coordination system. Would international assistance be required to support a national-led response in the case of a large-scale disaster? And you were mentioning earthquake, for example. Certainly that will constitute a cataclysmic type of disaster scenario for which international assistance, similarly as any other country, will certainly be welcome. Another interesting highlight of this SOD 2019, I think it's very interesting, that also probably relatively quite unique in the world maybe, is that now you have also indigenous people from the CHT included in the local disaster management committee. So to some extent, there is now a clear, let's say, recognition of the traditional also disaster management systems in that particular region of the south of the country. And I think this is really also excellent. Other tools that were mentioned, for example, on disaster management, disaster damage and needs, but also the forecast-based action task force. This is very important. This is really showing that Bangladesh really at the forefront of innovation on disaster management. Anticipatory action is really getting quite a lot of traction, and you have more and more stakeholders engaged in that manner in Bangladesh. If you want to know more information on that, I can reply further later. Ward and divisional DMCs were mentioned, and another point that is very important, notably for the international community, is the humanitarian civil military coordination platform structure. This is also recognized for the very first time in the SOD 2019. This is very, very important as well, because as you know, and as Bangladesh is very experienced on that, the support of the military to the national civilian-led disaster response can be important, and in particular in earthquake type of scenario, which have been tested on an annual basis through the jury exercise. I don't think there are any jury exercise scheduled this year, but you are certainly very conversant with such exercise that indicates how the military would support the civilian administration on logistics aspects, for example. Would it be a need for? So all that are very, very positive revision aspects of the 2010 SOD in the new 2019 SOD. So for the international community, so as it was mentioned, the guidance on role responsibilities, who does what, who should do what, is very, very important, because it provides to us the overall guidance on where our efforts or how our efforts should be tailored to the national system. It's a question of supporting how Bangladesh has decided to organize itself. So it provides, therefore, some views on which areas of collaboration could there could be between, for example, a UN agency and a particular department or ministry, for example, in line with their role and responsibilities as enshrined in the SOD. And most of these line ministries and departments who have a role in the SOD are the ones leading the clusters I was referring to, and our working groups on humanitarian affairs. So basically, the members of these different clusters and working groups have a clear idea on how to support, if needed, these line ministries and departments to deliver on their role. So it's very, very important document. Of course, as Jalil and previous speakers mentioned, there are several opportunities that needs to be seized, and one is certainly the very high importance to socialize this SOD, which were released in Bangla late 2019, few months before the declaration of the pandemic, and the pandemic scenario is not part of the SOD. And so, for example, a few months after the release of this SOD, we had this pandemic, and then it was a little bit complicated to understand which protocol will be implemented through, will it be the SOD, or will it be the protocols aligned with the Infectious Disease Act? So I think Bangladesh managed very well to find a way to organize itself based on these different legal instruments, but maybe in the future a clear guidance will need to be released on that. The ward and divisional management committees, how much they have been activated or not activated last year, when we think about the cyclone Amphan, for example, which was the first climate-related disaster in the country in the context of the pandemic, and then a few months later of the historical monsoon floods. So I don't think what DMCs were properly mostly functioning at that time? Maybe activated, yes, but did they had sufficient capacities to do so? Did they have the financial capacities to undertake their role? Did they know their role properly? Did they have the time even to understand their role properly? So of course, all that was a lot of work in a very, very short period of time with a lot of stress, including of course from the pandemic. But we are talking about here a recurrent type of disaster. So cyclone will come back, floods will come back. So what we can do in the next few months to equip, capacitate better for people to understand, even the citizens to understand better which role these different committees which service they will provide to them. So another point, that may be an opportunity. I don't know if it's reflected in the SOD 2019, maybe to double check, but you have also sometimes severe disasters which are very localized. So they are severe for a population present in one district or a couple of districts, or within one division only, not covering 50% of the country, for example. So how much the system can be decentralized, how much autonomy can be given at a decentralized level to tackle maybe severe but very localized type of disasters. So this also will give maybe more flexibility, more speed into preparedness and response interventions. Maybe that can be explored a little bit. There is a lot of goodwill, I think, from the partners to support national authorities, national and local authorities to fulfill their roles as per the SOD. And also, I think, a lot of willingness from multiple partners to socialize this SOD. So we need to think about the system on how best to capitalize on this goodwill in the most cost-effective way. How best we can support the MODMR on that. I'm sure MODMR would welcome that support, but it needs to be cost-effective for the ministry, for the local authorities concerns, and for ourselves as well, with the proper coordination. The previous speaker, if not mistaken, Humayun, was talking about how the local stakeholders, I think, and the CSOs can be engaged in these processes. I think it's very, very important. Local stakeholders, CSOs, they have to own these processes. So it should really come from them. These committees work for them. So if we can understand how they will engage, and therefore, I think that's the first step, and therefore, how can we support that? I think it's very important. So at the end, we will need to track, to monitor the progress on, for example, the socialization of the SOD, on who does what, where, and with whom in terms of partners. Bangladesh is a very big country, very dense, lots of committees, lots of divisions as well. So it needs to be properly coordinated. I'd like to flag again one point. We mentioned earthquake issues for the humanitarian community, the HCT in particular. The cyclones and monsoon floods of course, are known as recurrent disasters, so likely to happen every year. And it's true, the government and all the national stakeholders, etc., have enormous capacities. And so our role is to complement the efforts of the government if and when needed only. But by doing so, what is most important, and that's the big picture, by doing so, we are actually continuously revising, improving our processes, our tools, in order to prepare for a possible and hopefully disaster that will not happen, that will consist in, for example, a large earthquake scenario that could occur, for example, in Dhaka, Chattogram, or Sylhet, so major urban centers. And of course, the situation in urban, as Jalil was mentioned, is very different. The governance as well, the city corporations, etc. So there is a contingency plan on earthquake scenario that was developed in 2017, revised in 2019, and this plan will be updated again this year. So it would be very good to be updated in light of the SOD, but in light with the progress made by the government and different protocols, new arrangement, including with the military continuously. So I would certainly be very happy if we could continue this discussion, and also to benefit from your views on some of these aspects on urban-related issues. One key element to keep in mind, even though if the SOD clear significant improvement compared to 2010, they are still attached to this Disaster Management Act of 2012. And the IFRC had undertaken a very, very important study in 2017 on the legal preparedness status of Bangladesh. So how the legal apparatus of the country is ready to welcome international assistance if when needed. So in order for friendly neighboring countries to bring in international aid following an earthquake scenario, for example. So this legal preparedness analysis is called IDRL. IFRC is really the lead organization on IDRL study. They did it in 2017. They updated it in 2019 to analyze this preparedness status vis-a-vis the refugee crisis. I think the study could be maybe revised again to take into consideration the progress made with the SOD 2019. But there are certainly still some bottlenecks in legal preparedness that are really legal issues. So where legal stakeholders in charge of legal type of issues needs to be involved. I will give some examples. So bringing in international assistance in case the earthquake devastated the capital of Bangladesh is not just a matter of landing airplanes on airstrips that might be destroyed. It's also a question about customs, visas, the recognition of foreign qualification and that type of issues. So this is something that needs to be that will need to be addressed. It's not exactly the core discussion of today, but we should keep in mind that the SOD 2019 are still attached to this Disaster Management Act, which will probably need to be updated at one point as well.
Thank you very much for all that you are great about, the coordination, reminding us all about the key essentials that are in the SOD and how do we link them up in our day-to-day work. You touched upon the engagement of local stakeholders, the decentralization, socialization, popularization, and also the importance of earthquake preparedness. I just want to give a quick snapshot of the project because this deeper project, the Dhaka Earthquake Emergency Preparedness Project, has been there in the urban centers. So what we have been doing is we have been supporting these disaster management committees, formulating them, and trying to upscale the coordination from zone to the wards and to the city corporations. We have also been in touch with the Department of Disaster Management. As you mentioned, the capacity of these disaster management committees need to be enhanced. Are they aware about their roles and responsibilities? And we are also developing a module to capacitate them. And this is all may not be enough. So essentially, the larger message is that we will have to make use of these legal instruments and also to enhance our coordination, and also to bring other, other key stakeholders. So the project is also doing small pilots with the market associations, bringing them in and making them realize how vulnerable situations they live in, and how to, to be a part of the disaster risk reduction effort. Earthquake, yes, it's one of the most uh, key hazard when we look at Dhaka, and we the project has been supporting and doing this earthquake preparedness, but that's not the enough. And one of the objective here was that we all bring back the focus on the urban centers and collectively, because the focus has been traditional. The last not least, the international assistance, the IDRL approach. We at Bangladesh Red Crescent Society and IFRC, we have been engaged in the past, and it's thanks to remind us here. And I remember there have been some studies also which were initiated. But yes, this is also a reminder of to us and to all that how important would be an international assistance in a mega scale of disaster. Thank you very much. We have some questions from the participants in the chat box. One of the questions is that although the disaster management committees are formed at the ward level, but they're only active when the development partners are around. So is there any strategic plan from the government to make them activate? So, and then there are questions about how to enhance their functionality if there are disaster management committees. So as we go further, we will have to answer these questions and to ask also our friends from the Department of Disaster Management Committee. I see Achala on the screen. Over to you, Achala.
I think the points that are being discussed are quite important at this time, especially because we've had a revised standing order that has come out, and the importance of having it, and then all the stakeholders understanding their roles and responsibilities under that is quite important. And maybe a piece, maybe this has already been discussed, but I think another key piece from our side of engagement on the standing orders is also the way we are looking at the disasters is also changing from the anticipatory action perspective, which we have been able to include in the new SODs. So I think that is another piece when we talk about, getting all the different stakeholders, including the standard disaster management committee, whether it's at the district level, sub-district level, or down to the union level and the ward level. Normal traditional approach has been to look at things from a response perspective. Yes, there's a preparedness part and the response part. So how do we kind of also incorporate some of these anticipatory components as we go along? And which is why I think the point that you raised, the importance of getting all these people to understand the additional components that have come with the new standing order, and why they're coming and how we are looking at things. Like, for example, yes, the earthquake scenario is quite different, but at least for the cyclone and the flood scenarios, we've been able to do some quite good anticipatory action in the last year, with the SURF funding being released, and a lot of other work that has been going on. So what does it mean, I think, from the deeper project and the Dhaka like earthquake preparedness side, what does that mean? Now, maybe that doesn't mean a lot because these things are different from a event to event, hazard to hazard. But what does that mean for Dhaka? I think those are the questions that when we are talking about what disaster response committees and how you want to kind of orient them, maybe these are also additional questions to be asked from our side. So that's kind of the engagement that we as the Red Cross Red Crescent can play. We've started some engagements with the Ministry of Disaster Management at the request of the Secretary to orient some of these new things. Especially we had some events with the journalists to kind of again highlight this is how things are changing a little bit. We've had some events at district level again to brainstorm how best to kind of go ahead and present this. So rather than looking at it as an SOD activity, maybe looking at it as a pre-disaster event, pre-disaster coordination engagement, so that we can kind of explore some of these new things that are in the new SOD, in addition to orienting people on the broader aspect. So these are some of the few things that I think as the broader Red Cross Red Crescent, Bangladesh Red Crescent is quite interested in it, and we as the Federation can support, including other stakeholders, because I think you raised the point, government can do a lot, but I think we can do a lot to help the government as well, because we are in different projects, we are different places, and based on that, I think we can amplify the message more and more. More amplification doesn't mean what the government is in general doing. We can support that and we can amplify that, and I think 2021 is a good year for that. Also because maybe we've gone back a few steps last year, right? Like I think whether we like it or not, certain meetings stopped happening. There's a kind of a way of working that was there that has stopped. So I think we also need to relook at how we are looking beyond the COVID crisis and our coordination mechanisms and structures. We are meeting today in a webinar, which is great. These are the progresses that we have made because of COVID. But at the same time, we've also taken steps back where standard meetings that should happen are not happening. So how do we kind of also bridge those gaps? I think these are some of the things that under our work, we are trying to engage. So those are the key points I just wanted to highlight. There's no really specific things that I wanted to get in on the SODs, but later if there are questions, we can talk some of the work that we are specifically trying to do in the flood zone and the cyclone areas. But since we are talking more about the deeper, I just want to leave it at the higher level, and maybe we can discuss more.
Thank you very much. At the end, we bringing the focus that we have to have the anticipatory approach from a traditional approach, and the best thing is that we have a legal binding that the FBA has been mentioned in the SOD that gives us more leverage and recognition of the good work that we all have been doing. Thank you very much, and we all echo the same, that we are here to support the government, and we are here to supplement them from Bangladesh Red Crescent Society in the moment, and all the partners that whatever the government has been planning on disaster management, we are there to supplement them in their efforts. I think that is what we have from the key speakers today, and we would like to hear from our participants from different backgrounds that are with us, although we have some questions in the chat box. But I would appreciate if people have any questions to our panelists. And that reminds also me about the comment from Henry that we will make sure that we have a woman speaker next time. So I wish, yeah. So this was not planned, but there were some people invited, and unfortunately they couldn't make it to the event. So I hope there are some female friends from our side in the workshop who have some questions, and I leave it to them now and to the questions. Thank you. I request our friends from media to make sure that people are able to speak if they want to speak. We have next 15 minutes wherein we can take the questions. The questions can be related to the planning and system, the decentralization, the SOD, or it can be a complement or a situation that they are also in urban centers, their work and their experience about using the SOD in their work. The first question that I could see was, I was posed by Sabina saying, as per the SOD, Ward Disaster Management Committees has been formed at the ward level, but it seems that they are only active when the development partners are around. So is there any strategic plan from government to make them activate? That's the question one. So in fact, I see Nitaida has already responded to that, but it will be good if there's anyone else to throw some light on this and to respond from the government side.
If I'm not mistaken, the 2019 SOD covered, as one of the previous speakers, the first speakers were mentioning, not only emergency response, preparedness, response, early action, etc., but also risk reduction issues, right? So these committees should be functional throughout the year, both in normal time and in disaster time. So are this particular WAR committee, once they are activated, because the government has created that system, they need to be functional, and they are supposed to be, as the way I understood it, functional throughout the year. So is it the case? It's not the case, and why? If it's not the case, why it is not the case? Identify these different reasons, and depending on those reasons, see whether support can be provided in a way or another, or at least understand from the national authorities or the local stakeholders why it's not working or functional. But it's important, again, that local stakeholders, the citizens living in a particular ward, for example, union, they understand what services these committees are expected to support them with, to provide to them, and how they can have this partnership, collaboration work with these committees. That's very, very important. They need that ownership. So I think maybe one of the first steps could be also to facilitate, if we need to do something to assist the authorities in that, to try to facilitate a dialogue, kind of a governance, democratic type of dialogue in the field, an exchange of information, at least as a first step.
Any other questions or anyone else to come in?
Jalil bhai, I want to speak a little bit. আমরা যদি রিসোর্স ম্যানেজমেন্ট এবং কনসিডার করি যে ফান্ডিংস গভর্নমেন্টের থেকে যে ফান্ডিংস গুলো আসছে সেটাকে কনসিডার করে আমরা ডাব্লিউডিএমসি টাকে কিভাবে আরো বেশি ফাংশনালাইজ করতে পারি, আর সেটার জন্য কোনো স্পেসিফিক টুলস বা কোনো গাইডলাইনস আমাদের এই নতুন এসওডিটার মধ্যে ইন্ট্রোডিউস করানো হয়েছে কিনা?
প্রথমেই বলেছি যে সরকারের পরিকল্পনা এসওডি অনুসারে সরকারের দায়িত্বই এসওডিকে ডিসেমিনেট করা এবং ট্রেন্ড আপ করা, একবারে সেন্ট্রাল টু পেরিফেরি আপ টু দা আমার ফিল্ড লেভেল পর্যন্ত, ওয়ার্ড লেভেল পর্যন্ত সরকারেরই দায়িত্ব। সরকার যে কাজটা করছে সেটা গ্রাজুয়ালি স্টেপ বাই স্টেপ আমরা ইউনিয়ন ওয়ার্ড পর্যায় থেকে শুরু করেছি, ইউনিয়ন পর্যায়ে করছি, দেন আমরা উপজেলা পর্যায়ে করব, জেলা পর্যায়ে করব, বিভাগীয় পর্যায়ে করব। আমাদের কমিটিগুলি আমরা কার্যকর করছি, রেগুলার মিটিং করছি, এবং ট্রেনিং এর জন্য গভর্নমেন্টের যে অ্যালোকেশন থাকে ইয়ারলি, ওই অ্যালোকেশনের মধ্যে থেকে আমাদের ট্রেনিং কার্যক্রমটা পরিচালনা করতে হচ্ছে। সেই বছর যে বরাদ্দ আছে, এই বছর আমি 64 জেলার, আমি যদি 492টা আমার ইউনিট আছে ডিজাস্টার ম্যানেজমেন্টের, 492টা উপজেলার ট্রেনিং কার্যক্রম চালু করা এই মুহূর্তে এই কোভিড সিচুয়েশনে সম্ভব না। ফলে আমরা যেটা করেছি যে ডিজাস্টার প্রোন এরিয়া যেগুলো, ওই জেলাগুলিকে আমরা প্রায়োরিটি দিচ্ছি। এবং আমি আমার বিগিনিং স্টার্টিং রিমার্কস যেটা বলেছিলাম যে এই ক্ষেত্রে যদি এনজিও, আইএনজিও বা ইন্টারন্যাশনাল অর্গানাইজেশন যারা আছে, তারা যদি আমাদের সাথে একত্রিত হয়ে কম্বাইন্ডলি আমরা কোনো কাজ করতে চাই, বেটার, আমরা আরো ভালো রেজাল্ট পাবো এবং কভারেজটা অনেক বেশি দিতে পারবে। আমরা আমাদের রিসোর্সের মধ্যেই লিমিট থাকতে হবে, ওইটার মধ্যেই এই কনস্ট্যান্ট যেটা আছে রিসোর্স কনস্ট্যান্ট, তার মধ্যে থেকে আমাদেরকে কাজ করতে হবে। কিন্তু আমরা চেষ্টা করছি যেন ওভারল্যাপিং না হয়। এনজিও যেটা করছে সে ব্রাগ একটা পোর্শন কভারেজ করছে, কিছু পোর্শন কভার করছে সুফল প্রজেক্ট অফ দা ফরেস্ট ইনক্লুডিং, এখানে কাজ করছে আরেকটা এনজিও কাজ করছে এখানে। কাজে এই ধরনের যারা যারা ফিল্ড লেভেলে যে অংশে কাজ করছে সেই জায়গায় গভর্নমেন্ট যাবে না, গভর্নমেন্ট ওইখানে হেল্প করবে, প্রশাসনিক ভাবে হেল্প করবে, অন্য কাজ করবে, ডিডিএম সব কাজ করবে, আমার লোকাল অ্যাডমিনিস্ট্রেশন, ডিস্ট্রিক্ট অ্যাডমিনিস্ট্রেশন, উপজেলা ও কেয়ার করছে, সুফল প্রজেক্টের কেয়ারে ওই কাজ কভারেজ করছে কিছু কিছু অংশ। জামালপুরে যেমন আমাদের এনআরপি প্রজেক্ট কিছু কভারেজ দিচ্ছে। আমরা সব কয়টা মিলিয়ে যদি ডিভিশন ওয়াইজ আমরা করি, আমরা যদি উপজেলা ভাগ করে নিতে পারি, কিন্তু আন্ডার দ্য কন্ট্রোল অফ ডিডিএম, কারণ ডিডিএম এবং এমওডিএমআর মন্ত্রণালয়ের দায়িত্ব হলো ট্রেন্ড আপ করা। কাজে ডিডিএম এর নেতৃত্ব এই কাজটা হবে, ডিডিএম এর নলেজে থেকে হবে, এবং আমাদের উইথ কোলাবোরেশন অফ NGO and INGO and other organization.
ডিজি মহোদয়ের কাছে আমার একটু বিষয়টা যেটা হচ্ছে আমাদের রুট লেভেল থেকে সেই ইউনিয়ন পর্যায় থেকে সেন্ট্রাল পর্যন্ত আমাদের যে কমিটিগুলো সেগুলোতে ইউনিয়ন পরিষদের নেতৃত্বে রুট লেভেলের সেই ইয়েগুলো থাকছে। তো এখানে শুরুতে আপনি যেটা বলেছিলেন যে যেমন চট্টগ্রাম সিটি কর্পোরেশনের উদাহরণ দিলেন, তো এই জায়গাগুলোতে ইউজুয়ালি ধরেন আমাদের যে প্র্যাকটিসটা আছে এই যে লোকাল ইউনিয়ন পরিষদের বা ওই লোকাল গভর্নমেন্টের যে নেতৃত্ব সেটার সাথে যে স্টেক হোল্ডার আছে, স্থানীয় লিডার যারা আছেন, যারা ওপিনিয়ন লিডার আছেন, তাদেরকে আসলে এই জায়গাগুলোর সাথে ইনভলভ করার কোনো ইয়েগুলো এই মেকানিজমটা আছে কিনা, এটা একটা। আরেকটা হচ্ছে কোয়ালিটি ইনফরমেশন, যেটা হচ্ছে একবারে রুট লেভেল পর্যন্ত আমাদেরকে পৌঁছানো। এই বিষয়টা নিয়ে এই ইয়ের ভেতরে কি আছে, এটা মানুষ, সাধারণ মানুষ এবং আমাদের যারা ইনভলভ আছেন এই প্রিপেয়ারনেস এর সাথে যারা কাজ করছেন।
কমিটিগুলো যেভাবে এসওডি অনুসারে গঠন করা হয়েছে, আপনি যদি এসওডির ভিতরে যান, যে প্রত্যেকটা কর্নারকেই আমরা আসলে অ্যাড্রেস করেছি। মসজিদের ইমাম আছে, ইউনিয়ন পরিষদের সচিব আছে, আমার ব্লক সুপারভাইজার আছে, ওইখানে উপজেলা নির্বাহী অফিসার কর্তৃক মনোনীত বিশিষ্ট ব্যক্তি আছে, আপনি যেটাকে লিডারশিপ, ওইখানে লোকাল লিডারশিপ বলেছেন, আলটিমেটলি তারা কভার করছে। তারপর আমরা ওইখানে জেলা প্রশাসক কর্তৃক মনোনীত এনজিও প্রতিনিধি আছে ইন এভরি স্টেজ, বোথ ইউনিয়ন পরিষদ, উপজেলা পর্যায়ে এন্ড জেলা পর্যায়ে। প্রত্যেক জেলায় আমরা প্রতিনিধিদেরকে রেখেছি, এমনকি কেন্দ্রীয় পর্যায়ে যে আমাদের কমিটিগুলো আছে, আমি 4টা কমিটির আহ্বায়ক, সভাপতি। 4টা কমিটিতে আমাদেরকে আইএনজিও, লোকাল এনজিও এবং স্থানীয় গণ্যমান্য ব্যক্তি সবকিছু মিলেই আমাদেরকে কমিটিকে মনোনয়ন দেওয়া হয়েছে। ফলে কমিটিটা কিন্তু এখন অয়েল রিফর্ম, এবং এটা এমন ভাবে গঠন করা হয়েছে যেহেতু এসওডি 19 যেটা হয়েছে 2019, এটা আসলে অনেক পরীক্ষা নিরীক্ষার ফসল, এবং যদি তারপরেও কিছু থাকে, অপশন থাকে, যেমন কমিটি কোঅপ করতে পারে, একটা অপশন কিন্তু রেখে দেওয়া হয়েছে। কেউ বাদ পড়লে বা খুব এসেনশিয়াল কোনো অর্গানাইজেশন যদি মনে করে যে ওই জেলার প্রেক্ষাপটে ওই গ্রাউন্ডেড, আমি যদি বলি যে আদিবাসী অধ্যুষিত এলাকা আছে আমার দিনাজপুর, ঠাকুরগাঁও, যেখানে সাঁওতালদের একটা বড় বেল্ট আছে, আমার যদি মনে হয় যে আমি তাদের একজন প্রতিনিধি রাখার, আদিবাসী প্রতিনিধি রাখার, এই প্রভিশন কিন্তু এসওডিতে আছে যে আমরা কোঅপ করে নিতে পারি। আর যেটা ফ্রুটফুল ট্রেনিং, এটা আসলে যতটা না আমাদের ইচ্ছা, যারা ট্রেনিং নেবে তাদের সদিচ্ছা অনেক বেশি প্রয়োজন। আমরা চেষ্টা করছি, যেমন আমরা ট্রেনিং গুলি করছি শনিবার দিন, যেদিন নন ফাংশনাল ডে থাকে, নর্মালি অফিস ওয়ার্কিং ডে থাকে না। ওয়ার্কিং ডে তে ট্রেনিং করলে খুদ আমাদের এখানে যে ট্রেনিং ইনস্টিটিউট, আজ পর্যন্ত কোনো শনিবার শুক্রবার এখানে বন্ধ থাকে না, কারণ আমরা আমাদের স্টাফদের ট্রেনিংটাও শুক্র শনিবার দিন করাচ্ছি, কারণ ট্রেনিংটা ফ্রুটফুল হয়, কারণ মনোযোগ দিতে পারে। না হলে একজন ট্রেনিং থেকে উঠে ডেস্কে চলে আসে, জরুরি কাজ, এই ফাইল দিতে হয়। ফলে আমরা ট্রেনিং গুলি ম্যান্ডেটরি শুক্রবার এবং শনিবারে করছি। আর ঠিক আমরা উপজেলা লেভেলের ট্রেনিং গুলো আমাদের এই পর্যন্ত ফেব্রুয়ারি এভরি স্যাটারডে বুকড, যে আমরা ওইখানে গেলে আমাদের ইউনিট সাহেব ফ্রি থাকেন, আমার পিও সাহেব ফ্রি থাকেন, ডিও সাহেব ফ্রি থাকেন, ডিসি সাহেব কম্পারেটিভলি ফ্রি থাকেন, চেয়ারম্যান সাহেবরা আসেন রিল্যাক্সলি, বা উপজেলা পরিষদের যারা ইউনিয়ন পরিষদের কর্মকর্তা কর্মচারী তারা আসেন রিল্যাক্সলি। আমরা সারাটা দিন তাদের সাথে খুব রিল্যাক্স হয়েতে এবং অনেকটা ফেস্টিভ মোডে আমরা ট্রেনিংটা দিই। গেট টুগেদার হয়, বিশাল মোটরসাইকেল, যেমন মানিকগঞ্জ গেছি, স্কুলের মাঠে মোটরসাইকেল জায়গা দেওয়া আর রাখার জায়গা ছিল না, কারণ সকল ইউনিয়নের সবাই প্রায় মোটরসাইকেলে বাইক নিয়ে আসছে। এইটা হয় একটা ফেস্টিভ মুড সৃষ্টি হয়। আমরা চেষ্টা করেছি ওইখানে লাঞ্চ ব্রেক গুলো সবগুলি ওইখানেই হয়, ফলে আবার লাঞ্চের পরে ট্রেনিংটা শুরু হয় এবং একটা টি ব্রেক দেওয়া হয় যাতে ফ্রুটফুল হয়। আমরা চেষ্টা করছি, এখন কে কতটুকু রিসিভ করবে, আমরা যারা ট্রেনিং এর সাথে জড়িত, এটা ম্যান টু ম্যান ট্রেনিং এ ফার্স্ট সেকেন্ড তো সেই জন্যই হয়, একজন একটু ভালো রিসিভ করবে, একজন একটু কম রিসিভ করবে। তো আমরা চেষ্টা করছি আমাদের পক্ষ থেকে।
Try to add some points, with Honorable DZ, particularly to Aparna's question, how to functionalize, the local level coordination, committee. From my practical experience, at the end of the day, it's certainly a tricky question, right? Tricky issue. As Honorable DZ mentioned, that it depends on individual, participant, how they receive. But at the end of the day, if you go to the rural areas, you see we have to consider that the ultimate success of disaster management, depends on the local stakeholders, local people, right? And those who are in the committee, they have to be, to some extent given some incentives, right? When I remember, we went to different coastal areas, worked with Cyclone Preparedness Program, CPP, and people willingly actually participate normally, become member in the CPP. But the problem is, in the past, we have seen in a year only once or twice, the meetings are held, and they have got lack of different equipments, for example. So, I mean, the point that I want to mention here, if any sort of incentive, right? For example, a simple example going to give in, like if in a mobile phone, right? I mean, providing to the members, right, so that they can effectively, let's say, communicate, in different phases of disasters. Now, even to promote local people, for example, I mean, taking them to the cyclone shelter, for example, that certain incentive can be, offered, right? So, if the members in the union level or ward level, adjustment committees, if they are provided some sort of incentives, and even, for example, awards, right, in recognition that the committees that do really good, perform very well, they can be awarded, recognized. And then certainly some, incentives. Norman also mentioned, given the limited funds, financial, aspects and all, but at the end of the day, you have to actually invest, in this levels.
Thank you very much. I can see few participants having some questions, but because of the paucity of time, we will have to move ahead. Thank you, DG sir, and thank you, Himayu sir, for staying with us throughout the webinar and answering the questions. It has been an absolute pleasure to hear your perspectives and enlighten us with your opportunities, challenges that we have in the SOD. We would like to go into the last part of this webinar, which is the vote of thanks. I would like to request my colleague from Berlin, who has joined in the early mornings from Berlin, to give us some words from your side.
Thank you all for this opportunity to learn so much before 8 a.m. I don't know when this happened the last time, to have such a high level group of panelists and experts. And I have learned a lot on SODs and what are the challenges and forthcoming developments. I want to thank all you colleagues, and it's good to see to have also such a variety of backgrounds from disaster management and academia, United Nations and the RC Red Cross Red Crescent family. So it is my desire to thank you, and I have truly learned a lot. Thank you, Jalil, for putting this together, and obviously also thanks to the donor of the Deeper project, the European Commission, who is funding our efforts here. So I would like to send my greetings back to you.
Thank you, Thomas. Thanks for your words. That's it. And before we conclude, we'd like to thank our deeper partners, Bangladesh Red Crescent Society, British Red Cross, ChristianAid, ACF, and also our donor, European Commission, for funding us back to back for this earthquake preparedness project. To remind you all, we are running this webinar series just to highlight our learnings and also bring other sectors together and cross-learn. We, through our partner, media partner, the Business Standard, who supports us technically on this, we will be back with another webinar on 11th of February, wherein we will talk about how the volunteers have been trained and how we manage them and develop a system and connect it with the fire service and civil defense with the use of technology. Until then, thank you so much. It has been a pleasure of listening to you all and your perspectives on the SOD. Thank you very much once again. Over to the studio, Murshid Bhai.
Thank you very much, all the panelists and all the participants. Thank you from the Business Standard. We'll meet you again with another webinar in 11th of February. Till then, thank you very much.